Okay, let's talk dialog boxes. So this comes back from, Xerox PARC and then into the Macintosh interface. Was been adopted broadly since then. There are two different types of dialog boxes, modal or non-modal. And the idea is a modal dialog box forces the user to respond to it. So anytime you get something that pops up on screen and you have to click OK or cancel to dismiss it, that is a modal dialog box. It has put the program into another mode, and you must resolve that mode before it can continue doing what it was designed to continue to do. A non-modal dialog box pulls up information for the person interacting with it. So thinking maybe about Photoshop with panels or different panes. PowerPoint, where you have it's now being, usually it docks to the right-hand side as a side panel. These forms of dialogues give you options for the object you're working with, but they don't force you to make a choice before you can move forward. So in the past, instead of it being something that was something that would be docked into the main frame, it would actually pull up a dialog box, but that dialog box could then be clicked away from and be moved behind other objects, or maybe it would just kind of stay in the middle and get in the way. So again, the metaphor of how we're used to using software and the fact that there can be many different options present at any given moment indicates an increasing amount of sophistication on the part of the end user. And some of these concepts, specifically about the idea that non-modal dialogues are sometimes desirable, well, they're often desirable. However, for someone new to the software, a non-modal dialogue can be extremely confusing, and they can make it hard for programmers to avoid the system from getting into a state where the main program loop doesn't necessarily know what task is being performed. Which leads us to sort of another truism that I want to mention about user interface design in general, which is if it's easy for you to code, it will probably be something that is harder for the end user to use. And if you are writing an user interface that is easy for the end user to use, it is going to result in a lot more work for you to make sure that entire UI doesn't get to a point where things are inconsistent. Okay, but how do we create dialog boxes? There are some standard dialog boxes through JOptionPane. There is the one that just has the OK button. There is the one that has yes, no, cancel, and then there is one that has a text with an input field. And then each of these standard dialog boxes also has variations. The message dialog is the one with the OK. The confirm dialog gives the user the choice and will send back yes, no, or cancel. And then the input dialog will probably be the one you're most familiar with because you used it in previous classes. And it's a way to gather some input from the user without having them be at a command line. So if we have the message dialog box that pops up when we hit help and ask for about image viewer. So the JOptionPane class has a show message dialog, and we tell it the frame, and we can give it the content that is supposed to go inside of that. So image viewer, new line, and then version. And so there's a text string constant that's been defined. And then the title of the box. And then we are saying that this is an information message, which means that it's just the message dialog, so it just gets the OK. If we were to pass a different option in here, then it would know that it needs a yes, no, cancel, or some other items. Okay. Now, getting you ready for your project. The filters, the image filters, are going to be processes that get applied to every pixel inside of the image. So the basic structure of every one of your filters is going to be to grab the height of the image, to grab the width of the image, and for every pixel Y position in the height, for every X position or pixel in the width, get that color data, do some function, and then reset the color data with the new color value. That's how these image filters are going to work. So, for example, make lighter, that initial make lighter option looks a lot like the threshold option. If we have an image, tell the image to make itself lighter. If we have an image, tell the image to apply threshold, and then repaint the frame and show the status that we applied the filter. And if we don't have an image, then just say that there's no image. We can't apply a filter to a non-existent image. If you see this kind of duplication, and you will if you look at the code in Image Viewer 1.0, it's going to say, you just know it's like, oh, well, we have duplication. We should probably do some refactoring, which leads to the continued expansion of how that project is going to be implemented. So from 1.0 to 2.0, where we get that abstract superclass, define a filter superclass, but what does it mean to filter an image? Well, we don't know. That's kind of like, an animal can act, but what is it that an animal does? Well, we have to have the subclasses define that. For the animal class, rabbits run, foxes hunt, right? So we just say rabbits act like rabbits, foxes act like foxes. Taking that abstract argument here, filter means we know that we're going to change the image, but we don't know how. That has to be defined by the subclass. So we will make the subclasses be the specific modification for the pixels, but everything can now exist as an array list of filters. And the image viewer then doesn't have to say, hey, run threshold, hey, run darker, hey, run lighter. The main class is just going to say, hey, apply the filter. And then the darker filter, when it applies, does what it means to darken the image. The threshold filter, when it's applied, does what it means to apply the thresholds to the filter. And so, utilizing the techniques from previous classes, we're going from a rough prototype that kind of gives us like, oh yeah, this can work, to, hey, we can refactor this to make it more clean and more extensible. And so that image viewer 2, where we have the abstraction of the filter, gives us the ability to begin to decouple the image viewer from how the image viewer is going to modify those images. So I think that gives us enough to get started with our project. Please read over the description. I'm going to have a supplemental video that's in the description, because if you haven't worked with color before, and I know you have with the image from the picture from Lab 1, but we're going to be doing some different things, and I'm going to be asking you to create some specific filters. And understanding those requires maybe a little bit of explanation that doesn't belong in this lecture, but still needs to be conveyed. So I hope you've enjoyed this dive into Chapter 13 in GUIs, and I look forward to seeing what you produce.